Welcome to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. Thanks for all the likes and comments on the last video. If you would like to support this channel, please hit the like button and consider subscribing if you enjoy the content. And now, let's start with the first story. It's called About 2 Years. I work as a compliance officer at a company that needs to prove compliance with a government body and a certifying body. Our processes are designed in order to create that evidence. When I joined the company, I quickly noticed that the product development teams were not going by that process and were not documenting and generating the required evidence. I went to talk to their manager about it, and he told me we are very busy and we will get to it when we can. I explained to him that this project has been going on for 2 years already and will be done in 14 months. You cannot retroactively go back in time and try to create 2 years worth of evidence. He replied, "Your stuff is not a real issue and I am only concerned if there is a problem with the product." I explained to him that without this evidence we cannot certify the product and put it on the market. He smirked and said, "That is your problem now, isn't it? Do your worst." I admit a part of me wanted to resign after that conversation to avoid being associated with a potentially bad product or a failure to launch. Then it hit me. As part of the process, we should raise non-compliances as issues in the system. So I went to work. I reviewed all their work and evidence, and anything that was wrong or missing, I logged an issue against. I raised nearly 2,000 issues and have been reporting them to the VP and president of the company. He came screaming at me and threatened if I don't stop and put them as tasks for me to complete instead of issues, he will have me fired. I refused. A week later, we were having a meeting with my boss, his boss, the VP, and the president. He and his boss went into a rant about how I was trying to destroy the project and make us miss our timeline and how I should take ownership of making us compliant. I replied that I am just following the processes and regulations, but if you really want me to change these issues to tasks, I don't mind. But we need to do it the right way. I went on to explain that they need to submit the change request, which will need to be reviewed and approved by a panel. Of course, the request will drive changes to our processes, so it will need to go to the governance board. These changes will go against regulations, so we will need to file for an exemption before we implement them. Assuming we receive it, we will have to update and release all our processes again, which we do only in July. This meeting happened in August. After that, I can go change all the issues to tasks. Since I am not working on the product, I will need members of their teams to be freed up over 2 years, so I can document the work they failed to document. This whole thing should take about 2 years. Until then, I would have to hold them to the current process, assuming of course we receive the exemption. My boss, the VP, and the president were all chuckling as the other guy's face turned red in anger. They started to scream at me, but the president stopped them and ordered them to comply, and that he will personally check that it happened. Since they were riding their teams hard and committed to aggressive timelines, the team ignored the documentation still. They both got fired and replaced. The president negotiated a different timeline with the customer and paid the late fees. The next story is called My Last Day. This happened a few years ago at a restaurant I worked at. We had a newer night manager. I'll call him M. He was about 25 and a bit of a creep. He was always sleazy and showed favoritism. If you were a cute girl and flirted with him, or a dude and his bro, you were on his good list. If you didn't want to do certain tasks or called out without a cover, then no problem. However, if you were anyone who didn't flirt back or be his buddy, then you were on his bad list. Those on that list were the ones given the worst shifts and tasks that came with even more complimentary BS provided by M. From day one, M tried to flirt with me and I was friendly but did not reciprocate. Very shortly after, I was moved to the bad list. M would go out of his way to set me off, especially if I got scheduled with his buddies and no one to share the blunt force with. M would even make snarky comments about me from the sidelines as he watched me bust hard running back and forth from the kitchen. I could see him giggle. I remember his last sly one about my raid and that he tried to desperately shy off when I called him out for it. Yeah, he was a real douche. Anyways, I found a new job and put in my 2 weeks with another manager, one who was respectful. M, also being a manager, was told this. I had not told anyone I worked with yet and was going to after my shift. Lo and behold, another coworker runs up to me and asks, "Today is your last day?" I pulled them aside and quietly said, "No, but who said that? I didn't tell anyone yet." M came up to everyone out in the back and just blurted it out to us. He was even laughing and smiling about it. Then a couple more coworkers walk up saying the same thing. I was set off. I had been nothing but respectful to this man regardless of everything. Worked hard every shift and even went beyond to help everyone out. Yet he celebrates my leaving and invades my privacy by shouting it in his excitement. All because of what? Because I didn't give him attention? I was naive back then and he did so much I should have reported. Yet, in that moment, I decided not another second will I stay quiet. I made sure to go to the back office where the managers were, including the GM, M and a lot of other staff. I called out to M loud enough for all to hear. "So, today is my last day, M? Is that so? I didn't even know that." He stood there, silent. I actually just put in my 2 weeks today. Yet, since you couldn't wait to spoil that to everyone, I will consider today my last day. Just for you, since you were so excited about it. The GM pulled me aside. I explained what just happened and all the stuff M had put me and others through. That I knew others have complained about M, yet clearly nothing was done. I apologized, thanked him for the opportunity and kept my word as my last day. After that, I heard M change his tune. They also made him fill in some of my shifts due to being suddenly short-staffed. The third story is called Involve HR. I work in radiology. About 15 plus years ago, I was working with an X-ray tech called Smith. Now, Smith had recently received 2 official warnings of duty, one for abusing the boss and one for abusing me. Smith was told to change their attitude and behavior. Smith, however, went on a path of revenge that was endless. Nothing terrible, but just lots of things which I knew Smith had done, but I couldn't prove. One Monday morning, one of the A&E doctors came over to complain about how poor their X-ray image quality was a couple of nights ago. Smith goes over the roster board and sees my name corresponding to that shift. "You work the afternoon shift by yourself." Smith charges into the boss's office, demanding a full complaint process. Smith demands, since clearly the boss and I have it in for them, HR should run it independently. The boss tries to talk Smith out of it, but Smith basically says that they don't trust the boss to deal with me fairly. The boss tells Smith he will hand it over, but be careful of what you ask for. Apparently, Smith wasn't quite a lather, and so excited that they had got me. 2 days later, I am interviewed by 2 HR guys and an independent chief radiographer from another hospital. We go through each of the images, and I agree, the work is really poor. It's clear no one has actually looked too carefully at the paperwork with the X-ray images. The HR guy finally asked why I did so poor work. I replied that I didn't, and that if they bothered to look on the online pay system, I had called in sick that day. In fact, Smith had done the overtime shift. They looked stunned. I reminded them I expected the same process for Smith. I also lodged an official complaint about false allegations made by Smith for this case. Apparently, Smith tried to stick to the roster, but they showed Smith the payslip plus that they had signed off on all the images. While HR was deciding what to do with Smith, fire them or not, Smith had 2 more incidents at work and was eventually fired. The last story is called Keep an Eye on Him. When I lost my part-time job due to 2020, a good friend, let's call her Kate, helped me get hired at the after-school learning center her dad owns. She did warn me though that her dad was unapologetically racist. I'll call her dad owner. Anyway, owner and manager loved me as an employee. At the 2020 Christmas party hosted at the owner's house, I got offered the role of assistant manager. We chatted for a while after, and owner and I briefly bonded over our dislike of corrupt establishment politicians. I just prefer progressives, but I didn't disclose that part. I think he came out of that conversation with the incorrect assumption that I shared his politics and social views, and his racist tendencies immediately got less subtle. In January, manager hired a new employee to fill in for the role I left. The new guy was a very dark-skinned Indian man, around my and Kate's age, 24 at the time. On the guy's first day, owner was visiting. He has another job, so he only comes in on Mondays. Right before students start arriving, owner pulls me aside and asks me to keep an eye on the new employee. I don't remember the exact wording that followed. This is over a year ago, but basically, Without saying anything directly, owner implies that he suspected new employee would steal something or do something to the kids. Despite not saying the actual words, his intentions were clear and it was the most overt racism he'd displayed so far. But rather than say something in the heat of the moment, I decided to just maliciously comply. I've kept an eye on new employee ever since, watching him to make sure he succeeds. I made sure he had all the support he needed. I shielded him from owner's racism as much as I could. I invited him to grab drinks after work a few times and we ended up becoming really good friends. And last month when I told owner I had to leave at the end of this year, I knew no one else was interested in my position as assistant director. So I got most of the staff to endorse him as my replacement. I'm now training him to take over for me. My favorite part in all of this is that at last year's Christmas party, I introduced new employee to Kate. They clicked like no other couple I have ever seen and have now been dating for almost a year. New employee proposed to Kate at Thanksgiving and she said yes, and I know they are definitely trying for kids real soon. Owner knows they are engaged, but he didn't come in on Monday like he usually does and we haven't heard from him, so I don't know how he's taking it. And with that, we end today's video. Let me know what you think about the stories. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the stories and today's video? I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like what I do and want to support me, please subscribe and hit the like button. I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.